Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's first in a series of webinars on the Prescriptive Online Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency 90-Day Action Plan Tool, taking less than 30 minutes of your leader's time to build a tailored action plan aligned to your business needs. We appreciate that you're taking time to attend today's webinar on building an evolving resilient enterprise, especially in light of the continued coronavirus pandemic. We hope that your family are healthy and safe. This is the first webinar in our series of 6 webinars. Today, we'll focus on providing you an overview of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's online Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency 90-Day Action Plan. And the online action plan tool comprises of 90 online questions, taking about 25 minutes for each participant, and culminates into this 5 to 8 action items for this 90-day action plan. We look forward to an interactive webinar consisting of polling questions. Please do have your cell phone handy or open up another window on your browser and log into the Poll Everywhere website, https://pollev.com/Greg Schlegel910. And that is also in the chat box, the link. You should be able to click right on that. My name is Jim DeVries, founder of Enhanced International Group with Greg here. Been working with Greg for the last couple of years on this tool, and I will be the host of today's webinar. We also we're fortunate to have from Uphaven, Jenny Fromm, Claire Fitcham, and Cindy Lee Voslow, who will be helping us facilitate today's webinar. So it's great to have them here with us. So thank you. Joining me is, of course, Greg Schlegel. He will be sharing his vast experience. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and the former president of Apex ASCM today. Greg founded the consortium in 2010 and is a celebrated speaker and esteemed author and book. And the book is called Supply Chain Risk Management, an Emerging Discipline, published in 2015. Greg, a few words of introduction.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Hopefully I'm coming through okay. Folks, it's a pleasure to be here to talk about our passion. If you've heard us talk before, we're pretty passionate about supply chain risk and resiliency. We'll talk a little bit about the consortium, give you a thumbnail sketch of the consortium in a couple of minutes. Just one thing, I do teach supply chain risk management at Lehigh University here in the States, and I also teach ERM enterprise risk management. For you purists on the call, I teach ERM at Villanova University as well here in the States. So again, pleasure to be with you, and we look forward to a great interactive discussion about our passion and the tool that supports our passion. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. So let's get started as far as giving you an overview of this webinar series. Again, this is webinar 1 of 6. The second webinar will focus on the maturity model. Where are you? This third webinar will focus on the risk appetite. Who are you? That's on January 20th. And the fourth webinar is on operational propensities. How do you operate? More from a cultural perspective, change management perspective. And the fifth webinar is how do you put this all together for a game plan? And then the last webinar in the series is what's, making a supply chain risk management a priority in your company. And that will occur in April, the date to be determined. So we look forward to having you join us for all of these webinars. And with that, I will turn it over to Greg to give you a little bit of an introduction of the consortium. Greg?
Yep, you bet. We said we'd give you a thumbnail sketch. Jim mentioned the consortium was founded back in 2010, 2011. The genesis was from our first of a kind SCRM MBA class at Lehigh University. And it was so well received We built a body of knowledge horizontally, vertically with my mentor at Lehigh, Dr. Robert Trent. That culminated into a book, culminated into a body of knowledge. And now at the moment, we are 30 companies around the globe with about 1,500 supply chain risk professionals. They bring tools, techniques, and methodologies to support our book's vision of end-to-end supply chain risk. Those tools, techniques, and methodologies help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks around the globe. What do we offer? On the left side, we now have 2 online education courses backed by the consortium's body of knowledge. They are on a learning management system platform with one of our partners, Educazi. One is a basic supply chain risk management. The other is brand new. That is supply chain risk management in the public healthcare arena. Very excited about that. Both culminate with a certificate of completion from Lehigh University. We do virtual training like this, many webinars. Jim and I have done through EIG, his group, the consortium, and now with Uphaven. We do a lot of virtual training due to pandemic. We used to do classroom training. I say that. We hope face-to-face comes back in 2022. We used to do 20-some classroom workshops around the globe a year. We support certificates, certifications. We do assessments. We do mitigation. We coach companies on their supply chain risk journey. We bring some heavy lifting software to enhance visibility in your supply chain. We bring best practices, and we're also starting to help organizations build out supply chain risk war rooms. So that's a quick thumbnail sketch of the complexion of the consortium. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. Just a little background on EIG. EIG started a few years ago, and we have vetted over 50 consulting companies and SaaS providers, and we focus on enabling the entire enterprise. And EIG serves as that master integrator to provide the clients access to the best and brightest companies. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging our partners' tenured expertise. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining positive margin growth, the competitive advantage. We love this bicycle slide here. And as we look at the bicycle slide, as we look at it, we're linking strategy to execution. We have 2 geared wheels, and they're connected by a chain, with strategy being the larger of the 2. The 2 geared wheels are inexplicably linked and in sync, as you can see. Otherwise, we'll become derailed. Developing an agile supply chain risk and resiliency mindset will ensure that we're successful in our journey. The front gear moves at a slower rotation speed than the rear gear, which is on execution and creating that solid strategy. And in summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. And we love the quote, "Life is like a bicycle," by Albert Einstein. Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep moving. So we thought we would share that with you. Again, we're over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers dedicated to enabling your enterprise. With that, we'll go right into the introduction of our agenda. We're going to start off with today's VUCA world in the W recovery. And then what is the impedance for this 90-day action plan? The value prop, profiling your customers' SNR personas. And we'll talk about what personas are throughout the webinar. and then tapping your risk experiences to develop your tailored company persona, and then finally wrapping it up with the benefits of indoctrinating a supply chain risk management program. With that, Greg?
Okay, you bet. We said we'd talk a little bit about VUCA and the W-like recovery. So next slide, Jim, and we'll talk a little bit about the VUCA world and the enterprise resiliency. We thought we'd start first with getting you grounded with a bit of a couple of definitions from our point of view. So what is a resilient enterprise? We like this quote. It's in the book. Quick read. A resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of who? Customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. We'll be honest with you, that's a pretty tall order. Very tall order. But we think that to us is the best definition of a resilient enterprise that we've seen in our journey. So that's kind of the why. Why would anyone spend any time learning about and exercising supply chain risk and resiliency techniques? That's the why. The what and the how is a definition of supply chain risk management coming from our book again. And what does that look like? It's the implementation of strategies to manage everyday and exceptional risks along your entire supply chain through continuous risk assessment with the objective of doing what? Reducing your company's vulnerability and ensuring your company's business continuity. So one way to think of SCRM is basically the intersection of good supply chain management, performance, and pure risk management. So we wanted to get you grounded on a couple of definitions. All right. Next, the magnitude of risk. Why is supply chain risk and resiliency important? Well, there was a very good study, global study back in 2015 across hundreds of different companies around the globe. And the study came out with these findings that on average, I don't care who you are, I don't care what you make, I don't care how small or big you are, on average, your company's probably going to experience about 11 disruptions to your supply chain every 12 months. Then they went further and captured financial impact data and said, on average, those 11 are going to cost you $350,000 US per event. You can do the math. The math basically is $4 million US. What does that mean? That means over time, in a 12-month period, you and your company are going to probably have to find that money to mitigate risks to your supply chain. So that's a lot of money. All right. Whether you're small, medium, or large, it's impactful. So that is one of the reasons, the compelling reasons we feel to take a look at getting educated and becoming more aware of supply chain risk and resiliency. Next. So what is the VUCA landscape? This is a build slide, so bear with us. First and foremost, V stands for what? Volatility. This describes something that is liable to vary or change, sometimes very quickly and often for the worse. In the existing arena, what does that mean? That is government lockdowns and restrictions around the globe. That's our volatility at the moment. What does U stand for? Uncertainty. Definition: this is a state of not knowing or being able to rely on something solid. What is that? That is demand shocks, folks, and supply shocks coming from the government mandate lockdowns. Next, what does C stand for? Complexity. This can be defined as something with many parts in an intricate arrangement. What does that mean? That, folks, is our supply chain. That is our global supply chains with all our nodes, all our facilities, all our warehouses around the globe. We have complex global supply chains. And last, what does the A stand for? Ambiguity. Something is ambiguous if it is open to more than one interpretation. So I would say take all the above, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, added together, and that is our ambiguous VUCA landscape at the moment due to the pandemic. So we wanted to get you grounded on the VUCA landscape. All right. Also, we wanted to share this with you. This is a pretty compelling McKinsey report. It essentially, I think it was November of last year, 2020. And we wanted to share some insight and findings with you, especially on the right-hand side of the chart. And they dug very deep. The reason we're showcasing this report is they did a comprehensive analysis across multiple industries to look at, evaluate, and rank different industries in terms of their relativity to the level of risk shock exposure. And so you can see some of them on the chart on the right-hand side. The overall shock exposure on the right-hand side of the graph using the y-axis, low on the bottom, up to high exposure of shock and risk at the top of the y-axis. So if you can get your hands on this report, very, very great reading. They did a super job. And the reason we also want to share it is they had a great quote, a finding at the end of the report. And that quote was this: the COVID-19 pandemic has once again driven the necessity of managing operational and supply chain risks. It's catapulted these issues to the top of the CEO's agenda. And the unexpected in supply chain now has to be considered probable. We couldn't have said it any better. So that's why we like to share this, these findings with you in terms of get you grounded on demand and supply shocks. All right, next. And another set of data points just to get you grounded again and to provide some insight in terms of 2020. This is outcome from a global survey early in 2020, April of 2020, from friends of the consortium, company called IRM, the Institute of Risk Management. They are a pure risk management education company. They have certifications. They're not supply chain folks. They are pure risk, financial, insurance, that type of education organization. Friends of the consortium, we've worked with them many times, and they shared with us the outcome of a global survey that they did with chief risk officers, not with supply chain people, professionals, with chief risk officers, and asked them a couple of key questions. One of them was, what's the top 10 immediate impacts of COVID-19 to your company back in April of 2020? We wanted to share these with you. The red were major impacts, blue were significant, green were somewhat significant. Take a look. Top 10, rapid changes in objectives and work, of course. Delays in projects, sure, understandable. Delays in hiring talent, yep. Distraction from key objectives, crises will do that. Loss of sales, revenue, and orders, big impact. Positive reputational opportunity, what does that mean? I'll pause for a minute. Remember, we're talking to and getting answers from chief risk officers. They are trained and certified in risk, and they're trained and certified to think of risk as a two-sided coin. One side is when I say risk to you, the human condition thinks what? Negativity. They are trained to think on the other side of the coin, one company's risk event can be another company's risk opportunity. That's what that statement means. So they think about risk as a two-sided coin. Additional problems with suppliers, of course, staff absences due to sickness from the pandemic, very understandable, contractor issues, and cybersecurity. So we wanted to share this set of data points with you as well, which came to us from friends of the consortium early on in April of 2020. All right, next.
So next we have a polling question, building on all of what Greg has mentioned. What risk events have you experienced since COVID-19? So ask if you would enter in the poll, enter your comments in the poll. We'll pull up the responses here. And if you have a word phrase, like the one that I showed here, delayed source materials, you can put an underscore between the words and they're all come together. So if you have a phrase, just use the underscore key between the words. Greg, comments? You're on mute.
Yep, we appreciate your engagement. Feel free. Delayed sourced materials, but of course, again, we weren't teeing up. We didn't try to tee up. We tried to provide you with some data points, but we're looking from the audience to get your perspective of what you've experienced so far during COVID. So project disturbances, sure, understandable. Revenue issues. Always happens in a crisis. We'll talk a little more about demand and supply shocks and the impact. So, yep, keep those experiences coming in free form. We appreciate your engagement.
So a lot of good things. There, disturbances, latent projects, here they come in.
Yeah. Yeah, and the interesting part of
probably,
yep, this the more frequent a phrase comes in, the larger the font. So it's kind of a frequency table as well. So
yeah, if you like something somebody else wrote, just write the same thing and it will pop out.
yeah, that's the very nice part of Poll Everywhere. At least using this methodology, this technique. Yep. Very good.
Staff disconnection. Bullwhip. Ooh.
Bullwhip.
Ooh, put in bullwhip. All right.
I love it when the audience basically sets up the next slide. You know, Jim, I like that.
I like that. Maybe we'll have them present the slide.
Well, we'll certainly look for that individual or individuals to get engaged with us when we talk about the bullwhip in a minute or two. Terrific.
There we go. Delays.
Yep. Time is money.
The one thing I didn't see here was inventory. Interesting. I would have expected. Maybe it's in there. I missed it.
Yep.
See levels.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Just taking off here, Greg. Cancels, delays and cancels. Nice.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, we wish we didn't see all these in your answers. We really do, but it's the real world at the moment. Yeah, the ports are, well, the LA port is in the news every single day. Sure. The local news, it's in the local news. I mean, it's crazy. Supply chain is now a phrase that you will talk over in Christmas. Now you can talk about your job where you never could talk about your job before. Yep. Yeah. Because everybody knows everything about supply chain risk now, right, Greg? Hope is eternal. Yes. Yeah. When we started this journey 2 years ago, risk management was like, what? Now it's on the local news. So it has changed. Well, thanks everyone for those fantastic results there. The uncertainty, we'll be talking about that. So this is perfect. This is what we wanted. And we'll just go ahead and move on.
about the
Thanks.
bullwhip effect, because
Mhm.
somebody mentioned that, we decided to bring up the slide for them. The bullwhip effect, of course, is defined as the uncertainty caused from distorted information flowing up and down the supply chain. So on the left here, we have its effect from the demand perspective. The left side of the wavy line is the customer. And a small change in that amplitude of that demand can manifest itself into a large disruption back through the supply chain. So that's the demand side. Now on the supply side, in the upper right-hand corner here, we see we have its effect, and the left side of the graph, the factory can experience a risk event, which disrupts the flow of goods downstream to the ultimate manufacturer and its customers. So we seem to be having both of these shocks. Very often in risk events, you may have either the demand or the supply, but now we have both. And so when you put them together, you know, across the different industry sectors, you know, we're going to have this W-like recovery. Of course, the intermittent COVID surges where you have a blockage of one country versus another country, and all these supply demand changes, it's just going to exacerbate itself. And that's what we're living through now. And, you know, we expect, well, the Fed in the US expects this to somewhat subside by the middle of next year to the end of next year. But we're going to be living with it for a while. But every 6 months, they say another 6 or 8 months, it will subside. And we've been saying that for the last, you know, since the beginning of the pandemic. So who knows when this will end? But we know one thing, whatever the company is that is able to manage these surges, those variations in supply and demand, they will gain their unfair market share. And they are. Companies are making a lot of money out of the pandemic. And the question is it you, or is it going to be somebody else? So Greg will now share the impacts that we predicted back in the spring of 2020 and where the recovery stage is with the 3 R's. Greg?
You bet. This is our COVID-19 recovery continuum. Essentially, this picture to us is more of a continuum. We put this together using a lot of the data points that we shared with you early on in the pandemic. I think we produced this, Jim and I, as a consortium group, put this out somewhere around the end of May, beginning of June. So we made a call, especially with our clients. We wanted to give them a forward-looking set of, I'll say, heads up. And so on the top of the slide, from left to right, are the government mandates in blue. You can see them. On the y-axis on the left, we have essentially our over demand and under supply. So let's take a look at that. On the y-axis, first and foremost at the top, we put in a section called over demand and under supply. In the middle of the y-axis, we put in a section in green called supply and demand in reasonable balance. And then on the bottom of the y-axis, we had a section called under demand and oversupply of product. And then on the x-axis on the bottom, we developed our essential 3 R's as a business response going left to right on this continuum: respond, recover, renew. Let's give you a quick thumbnail sketch of each section. All right. From the first R, which is respond. All right. Think of it this way: the lockdown and government requirements at the outset, especially for PPE, you know, personal product equipment or PPE, that posed several hardships on many suppliers of healthcare materials, causing what? An over demand situation and under supply. So the suppliers in the healthcare arena, especially PPE, all right, had to quickly rescale their supply chains. Now, the secondary effect of the lockdown around the globe, all right, for sectors other than healthcare was an immediate under demand and oversupply of product. All right. This led to an approach of evaluating product portfolios, reducing the marginal products, and perhaps furloughing personnel to do what? Maintain cash, because nobody could go to work. Second R, recovery. Again, the government reopening around the globe. And the second surge, third surge, fourth surge, and more are now manifesting itself into another over demand and undersupply for what? PPE products around the globe, even for those companies who reinvented their portfolios to produce new products for new healthcare channels. And in sectors other than the healthcare, the phased reopening is now causing what? Over demand and undersupply for those companies who have been closed for months and struggling to maintain their product volume, such as handy wipes, toilet paper, and on and on. Jim mentioned, you see the backlog of the carriers with the containers at all the US ports and elsewhere. You see that on TV every day. So now we're into a over demand and undersupply. And the third are the renew. All sectors, no matter who you are, will have to look hard going forward at their product portfolios. They'll have to continue to reinvent those product portfolios. You're going to have to continue to rescale your supply chains to deal with existing and the new customers coined the new normal. So at this point in time, as it progresses into the new normal, we think it looks like a W-like recovery to us because of the supply and demand shocks. The latency in every supply chain, remember, the latency is there in every supply chain to rebalance itself. And therefore, we think that we're going to be experiencing the bullwhip effect to a certain level in the rest of 2021 and probably through a good portion of 2022. So that's a quick thumbnail sketch of our W-like recovery with the 3 R's.
Great. Thanks, Greg. I think we have a polling question now. Greg, where do you feel your organization resides within these three phases? Are you in the respond, recovery, or renew, or a combination of those? So please go ahead and enter it in. When I looked at that last chart, this seems like we're in that recover stage now, just listening to the news, where folks are now taking it more serious. We've had a number of waves in the US. I think we're on our fourth. Are we ending our fourth wave, Greg?
It might be that many. Yeah, it might.
Yeah, and the question is, will there be a fifth wave of viruses coming in the next with Thanksgiving coming on? So, and every country around the world, as we just said, is different. Every country seems to be at a different point in vaccination rates, different situation in cases, in critical cases and non-critical cases. It just seems we're not all at the same place, as you would well imagine, around the world. And therefore, you know, when you lock down or slow down your country, then it affects other countries. So we're going to continue to have this exasperation between these events continuing on.
Yep. And what we've done, because we do this a lot for the audience. We provide the definition of the phases, the 3 R's, and we started to add in the combination of the three, because what we've seen through our clients and observations and additional webinars is that if you're a fairly large organization with multiple types of product lines in different types of industry sectors, you could be in different phases through each one of those, with each one of those product lines, if they are in disparate types of industries. All right. And so it's, again, the combination depicts that the pandemic impact is so uneven and so impactful and staggeringly uneven across multiple sectors. That's why we started to put in an answer in terms of combination. So I understand where folks are coming from with that answer. Thanks.
All right, I think we'll move on.
Yep.
Thanks for the participation. And I will move to the next section. The second section focused on what drove Greg and us to, what's the impotence for developing this prescriptive 90-day supply chain risk and resiliency assessment and action plan, aligning to where you are today and what you need to do next. We're not in the hallways anymore, so to speak, and we want to just share with you some of our thoughts of what was the impotence of this tool. Of course, the COVID pandemic was a big piece of it, and not ability to go out and walk in the hallways. The McKinsey Report in 2020 on why investing in supply chain risk or supply chain resiliency pays off. Further reinforced by the focus on governments to industry leaders to news networks, as we just discussed. So a lot of reinforcement there. Again, the inability to walk the hallways, as we discussed before. The action plan provides your company insights, the operating environment supports you in building capabilities to ensure that you can not only survive, but thrive during these times. And then finally, as we just discussed, there'd be a continued staggering of uneven negative impact of the pandemic, due to these artificial demand and supply shocks. Now, the thing is, people are panicking, they're overbuying, you get shortages and you make too many goods. We're having all those things. The latest example being Clorox saying they gear it up to make Clorox, now nobody's buying it. So those types of stories are going to be becoming more and more frequent, but we do recommend you don't wait it out, because you're act now or you're going to be acted upon in the upcoming months. It's never too late to get in the game to become proactive. So that was the impetus to drive the development of this tool. And so the tool itself is a 90-day action plan, 5 to 8 action items. The 7 hours is your total time investment over 3 months. It's not to get the survey, that's just to get an understanding of the action plan. Everything's done virtually, the collaboration and coaching sessions. It's broken up into 3 different assessments: where you are from a maturity perspective, who you are from a risk appetite perspective, and we'll cover all these in a few minutes. How do you operate, your operational propensity, and then the 90-day action plan. So what we ask for each company is a designated lead with an onboarding call that goes and addresses, brings in the 5 to 8 key stakeholders. Now, this is very important that we get the perspective of supply chain, finance, marketing, logistics, operations, procurement, because everybody has a little bit of different perspective of how to manage this risk. And it's the bringing all this team together under a aligned supply chain risk and resiliency strategy that's going to be what you need to survive and thrive. So we look to get those different perspectives. So it's about 25 minutes, 30 minutes top for each of those folks to take the survey. And then we will provide, the consortium will provide this 90-day action plan report with details of your industry, but also details of what to do next. We'll assess where you are at, because the biggest question is, what do you do next? We're kind of stuck, you know, there's a lot of different things out there. There's a lot of widgets out there. There's even more SaaS solutions out there today. You know, where do you start? What do you do next? So we'll help you on that journey with best practices of what works. Then we'll have that first confirmation call for an hour. Make sure that you're comfortable with what the report says and it's aligned. And then a second call, did it work? And then a third call for the pulse check, and then a wrap-up call. So that's what the 90-day action plan approach provides you. So very little effort. In summary, again, maybe 7 hours of your time, but you're walking out with a complete action plan for your supply chain risk and resiliency efforts. So I think it's you know, we're trying to make it so it's not obtrusive. We know everybody's busy, but this is a pretty good investment of your time to get on top of things. All right, with that, we want to talk then about the value of profiling your personas. So the value prop, and we're going to go through each of the tools now. The first tool is the supply chain risk journey roadmap, the 21st century roadmap that the consortium developed a number of years ago. And it's pretty much our staple here. And we assess where are you today and where do you want to go. On the y-axis, you see supply chain risk and resiliency maturity. And on the x-axis, we have competitive advantage from high risk on the left to low risk on the right as you become more and more mature. And you have the 5 stages: foundational, visibility, predictability, resiliency, and sustainability. So let's just go through these quickly. We'll go into detail in those upcoming webinars. Again, the first stage is foundational. It involves companies that have little or no awareness of risk management or formal education relative to the tools, techniques, and methodologies, best practices, and solutions that are available today. And why foundational? This stage supports the development of your supply chain and supply chain risk and resiliency knowledge and practices, best practices in supply chain, things like CSCP, SCORE, DDMRP, all those things that we use on a daily basis from a supply chain perspective and knowledge. We also have a supply chain readiness tool that provides some valuable insight of where you could be on this stage. The second stage, visibility. Visibility and awareness of the risk across the supply chain is, of course, a very important first step in the risk management journey. It also relates to knowing, preferably in real time, the location of materials, assets, and your inventory. The goal is to create an environment in which transparency is generated across your supply chain, meaning upstream to your suppliers and downstream to your customers. So we're really talking end-to-end supply chain here. The ability to become aware and respond more quickly than competitors to unexpected risk events is a critical success factor in this stage. And why is visibility the second pivotal building block? And we, as Greg loves to say, what you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you. So you got to see in order to believe. So the third stage is predictability. As companies progress in their journey, they leverage their visibility capabilities. So now we can see it, but we want to test what if scenario plannings. And these exercises utilize the network optimization, probabilistic modeling, mapping tools, and provide a view into your supply chains that might react to those risk events that are occurring, including demand and supply disruptions. And this insight helps companies create risk response plans. So here you're starting to build risk registers. Exemplar companies that led to the development of supply chain and online risk war rooms is what's being developed now. And these virtual war rooms now are supported by sophisticated tools and techniques, allowing customers to become more proactive by identifying those risks in real time, assessing them using digital twins, of the supply chains, mitigating those risks, and getting those risk mediation plans out there quickly. And of course, why is predictability important? Of course, is to how to understand supply chains will react to that risk stimuli before it occurs. So now you're starting to be proactive instead of 100% reactive. Okay. And then the fourth stage is resiliency. At this stage, risk management leaders are embedding new risk tools, techniques, methodologies, and key risk indicators such as time to recovery. Time is money, as we know, value at risk. How much value in your supply chain are you losing because that part is not where it needs to be? And the resiliency indexes, and into the daily support, a daily supply chain decision-making process. How are you making decisions? Are you making resilient decisions every day? These frameworks, protocols, metrics, and organizational structures provide, of course, a foundation of operational excellence in risk management and a resilient enterprise. I think when you hear resiliency, you're kind of going, can't we just do that now? But without the foundation of visibility and predictability, trying to do resiliency may not work out well. You need to build that infrastructure. And then the hitting on top of the mountain, getting there, sustainabilities. Of course, we build upon these organizational infrastructures through corporate frameworks such as enterprise risk management, ERM, governance, risk, and compliance, GRC, ISO risk, all those nice buzzwords you often hear about. Companies at this stage are creating risk-adjusted culture that includes risk considerations during decision-making. So now you're embedding this risk culture into your business, and everybody in the company knows what they need to do. When you say risk is no longer a red word, which means we can't say risk. Risk is an opportunity and taken proactively. And of course, why is sustainability important? Okay, it's once we've done all this work to get up to this level, we have to proactively address it, meaning we have to provide maintenance to it. And so supply chains leaders operating at this maturity model must understand that each stage in the journey corresponds to several years of continuous effort, and rebuilding versus maintaining this level is a lot more effort. If you have to rebuild, you don't want to go backwards from where you're at, and sustaining this, is really where the best in class performers are. And then throughout this entire 5 stages, we're always espousing identify, assess, mitigate, and manage your risks. And the 90-day survey will provide you where you are today and where you want to go. And you may not be surprised, but a lot of companies say, we don't want to hit stage 5 because it may cost too much money. So we often look at that and say, you want to do this from a return on investment perspective where you're achieving your goals throughout. So next we'll go through an example from one of our clients, a heavy industry client who said, we're in the middle of the visibility stage today. From the assessment, we gave them the assessment, and then we had a one-on-one call with them and said, is this where you're at? And is this where you want to go? Other clients sometimes said, we're in visibility and all we want to do is complete visibility. We're not even looking at beyond that. So every client is different. There's no right or wrong. It's just where you're at. They recognized and agreed that our recommended actions that we will require to transform their company to the subsequent predictability and resiliency stages to get to sustainability. So we had a long discussion with them, well, an hour discussion, and it was very aligned. This client shared with us that they had developed the manual processes to identify, assess, and mitigate and manage risk. So that was something that was part of their DNA, which was good to hear. And they had established a corporate risk management organization that is focused on supporting business units to create infrastructure, such as establishing digital twins with real-time alert visibility and action planning with a risk register. And they're gaining success in addressing disruptions in real time to minimize the impact of disruption. And they certainly get time as money. So next, Greg will discuss risk appetite. Greg?
You bet. We want to just move forward and talk about risk appetite from the pure risk environment. And so this comes from a McKinsey report again, just to get you grounded. The risk profession, not the consortium, has defined risk appetite as the aggregate level of and types of risk a board of directors and management are willing to assume to achieve its strategic objectives and business plan, consistent with what? Applicable capital availability, liquidity, and other regulatory requirements. So that's kind of the thread and slant of what we call risk appetite. Next. This man said it best, Mr. Drucker. Sometimes there's a question about whether he actually made this comment, but he does get recognition. Take a look. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's true, especially in risk management, more so than just supply chain management performance improvement. So we're talking about culture, folks. Next. This essentially is the risk appetite perspective, the second of 3 graphs that you receive from the tool. Essentially, I'll go through the chart real quick. On the y-axis, you have a risk point of view coming from risk as a negative on the bottom of the y-axis and risk as a positive. Again, the two-sided coin on the y-axis. On the x-axis, essentially, are the tactics and or strategies that tend to support the 4 risk perspectives that you see in the graph. And let's go through each perspective. There's only 4 that we're aware of. The orange are pragmatists. These folks wait until the very last minute to decide. Basically, they are reactive. They're not big on planning. The conservators are the dark blue on the bottom. Their biggest concern is avoiding a loss, very careful to avoid risk to the bottom line. Third, the managers, which are light blue in the middle, they're careful to use balance risk and reward techniques. They do a lot of tools and techniques to quantify risks, balance act, if you will. And then the gray are maximizers. And essentially, they're the big risk takers. They want they see big rewards. You know the classic deal, high risk, high reward. They go for the gusto. We call these folks gamers, all right? Now, there's no right or wrong in a risk perspective, all right? And essentially, we'll show you an example in a minute, but we've come to the conclusion that risk perspectives in an organization are driven by only 2 drivers. 1, your personal risk experience in your career, and 2, where you're positioned in the company. Only 2 drivers. Next slide, we'll give you an example. This is an actual consumer packaged products good, CPG. There's the graph, and the tool has positioned the company in terms of what we call a pragmatist conservator. All right, you can see the color-coded elements of perspective. The red are maximizers, the green are conservators, the blue are managers, and the yellow are pragmatists. So this particular company touches 2, pragmatists and conservatives. Well, you might be asking yourself, can you have more than 1 perspective? Of course you can. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. The issue is, do you know who you are? That's the key element. So with that, we'll move on.
Okay.
To Jim.
So the third graph and assessment is on operational propensity. And this is, more about who you are and how you operate. So Greg talked about who you are. Now we're talking about how do you operate. So the x-axis here is or the y-axis is on speed from slow to fast, and stability and control from efficient to collaborative. And we look at that as the internal perspective. The external perspective is from an agile perspective and external focus and differentiation. So external focus is from narrow to broad, and agility is from weak to strong. So the quadrants are laid out. We have 4 quadrants or 4 personas, as we would call them. And the first persona in the bottom left is bureaucratic, which is hierarchical, structured, control, coordination, efficient, stability, controlling orientation with slow speed and efficient stability control. Moving to the right, the bottom right corner is clannish or trapped. And in this area, you're going to be focused on collaborative, where you're working in that nurturing framework. And then moving counterclockwise in the upper right, opposite of bureaucratic, we have agile. And these companies tend to be more dynamic, entrepreneurial, risk-taking, values innovation, creative orientation. Sometimes we think that the agile companies are more post-2000. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, but in general, that's what we're seeing. And then in the left corner here in the upper right, we see startup with characteristics of entrepreneurial. So you may have more than one business unit you may have a bureaucratic business unit that's been around for the last 10 years, and then you're trying to jumpstart your business. There's a lot of companies doing this today, where they'll have their foundational business that's steadfast, and they're trying to do a startup business. Now, the startup business, the question is that startup business, is it going to fold into a bureaucracy type of a business, or is it going to be more agile? And then how does that affect your entire culture of your organization? So that's the second or the third analysis. And this is a company that's very interesting. It's been around for quite a number of years. They started supply chain risk and resiliency back in 2000. It's a high-tech company, and they're rather mature. They're in the sustainability stage of maturity, and they are a maximizer. And it was very interesting that, they came out to be what we call a box kite. And a box kite is very stable, but it takes a lot to get it off the ground. So as you could imagine, it took a while for this company to get going. Very often, you'll see kites that are singular. They'll have a long tail, or maybe they'll be bureaucratic and startup, as we mentioned before. So that's a little bit of background on operational propensity. So putting it all together in an action plan, the action plan of sustainability, maximizer, and clannish, a box kite, our last example with the high-tech company. Our action plan is, of course, we want to keep everything going. We want to maintain the company, and then we want to reinforce and drive new enterprise risk incentives to reinforce good risk management behavior for the enterprise, something we mentioned before. On sustainability, we want to build out staged implementation of ERM type and GRC like solutions. We want to get that going. And then we want to continue our supply chain risk and resiliency best practices within the business decision-making process, and then constantly review the tools and hone the tools to keep them up at state of the art, best in class, and then real-time visibility of return on investment. So, every program has to provide that ROI benefits feedback to substantiate the program. So we certainly espouse that from the beginning, and certainly at the end here is we're at this at the end of the supply chain risk and resiliency in the sustainability stage. But of course, you never end. supply chain risk and resiliency. And so, and then the last item that we have is, developing that, maintaining the internet site for your entire enterprise. So I just noticed we're at the top of the hour. Again, we apologize for going over, but we thank you for staying on as long as you have. Just want to close it out here again. This is our overall plan, overall offering here, and we'd love to hear from you about the program. You can contact either Greg or I at our first and last names at the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium.com. Greg?
Yeah, again, we apologize for going over. I'll just keep moving towards, maybe we just go towards the last slide in terms of, this is the ask. We ask that, 5 to 8 executives from your company fill out. We want diversity in terms of perspectives from different departments. We would ask that potentially a prospect or a company keeps it small with the same division or the same product line, and then 5 to 8 execs, and a bonus for every company that provides 5 or more executives to fill out the tool, the survey tool. We will offer that company 1 free pass to our supply chain risk and resiliency online course. That's a value of $1,400 US. So next, I think, is the benefits. Yep, we'll go to the last slide of, what's the compelling reason to develop an SCRM program. This is from our observation, from research, from studies. Cost reduction. You can reduce your insurance premiums. Insurance companies will enjoy discussing with you on premium renewal. You can actually reduce your insurance premiums when you demonstrate you have a robust supply chain risk management program. We've seen it. Next, cost, not only cost reduction, but cost avoidance. We talked about that at length. If you can identify, assess, and mitigate a risk faster than your nearest competitor and detect that risk and mitigate it, the best in class basically essentially do cost avoidance, because in risk, time is money. Next, working capital. You can improve your working capital. All right. These are some of the best in class metrics from Aberdeen Corporation. You can by good risk management, you can essentially improve your cash flow forecasting for your financial group and free up 10 to 30% more in terms of free working cash. And we have 2 more. Cash conversion cycle. We like this as a metric. It involves inventory, payables, and receivables. It's on Wikipedia. We don't have time to give you the definition, but we think it's a great metric to measure supply chain efficiency and effectiveness, and it's a risk mitigation methodology as well. And then finally, Altman Z-score. Think about it. Not many people know about it, but this is a bankruptcy predictor set of algorithms. It's free. You can find it on Wikipedia. All you need is income statement and balance sheet data, and you can go through a heat map, and it's got a 90% accuracy level of projecting bankruptcy 12 to 15 months into the future. Who wouldn't want to know that, especially with their tier 1, tier 2 suppliers? All right. And then finally, the reason we advocate key supplier financial viability is that essentially, if you have to change a tier 1 supplier, the number comes out anywhere from $1 to $3 million out of your pocket to change from one key supplier to another. That's real money. So think big, start small, act fast. That's our benefits of a SCRM program. Jim.
Thank you. And I think that wraps up the webinar today. If there's any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to answer any questions you have. If you want to stick around, we realize that we've gone over a few minutes. And let me just check to see if there's any questions out there that might want to be asked. think, let's see. There's one question here on what the genesis of VUCA is, Greg. What's the genesis of VUCA? Where did that come from?
Essentially, that came out of the U.S. Army way back when, early on, right before World War II, I believe it was. The Army basically started to talk about risk in going to war, and so I think the genesis was out of the U.S. Army many years ago.
Okay, great. And then you profiled the maturity model and their stages. Can you tell us how long each stage might take?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a logical question. Our observation is every stage, and this is a journey, every stage is normally about 18 to 24 months, folks. So it's a journey, not a point solution.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And thanks for your questions. If we didn't answer your questions, I think there are a few more. We will follow up with those participants. Thank you so much. We're 7 minutes over. We look forward to our next webinar on December 7th on the maturity model. And many thanks. Greg, any closing comments?
No, just thanks a lot for your engagement. Thanks for filling out the polling questions, and we hope to see you on December 7th, where we talk a little. We're going to go through more detail of each and every aspect of the 90-day action plan. So thanks a lot.